Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the J episode. This is episode number 10 from season 3. I can't believe we're already this far into it already. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Field of 68 Media Network. I have a very, very, very special guest with me today. He's a big time friend of the show. He's been on here before. He's always been a fan favorite in Omaha. He's one of my favorite teammates that I had a chance to play with. He's also done some radio broadcasting for the boys, and he's also a newlywed. Hey, congratulations! He is always the pride of Shawnee, Kansas. This is my man TC Tyler Clement. Welcome back to the J, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Appreciate the intro there. Good to be back on.
Man, I've missed you so much. Like the last time we saw each other, obviously, was celebrating you and your lovely wife. That was my last weekend in the States before having to head back to Europe for, this game called basketball. I would not have had it any other way. That was the perfect way to end the summer, in my opinion. So again, congratulations. How's the newly wed life going for you?
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate you coming and glad you had a good time. It's been going well. It's nice. I've been telling people it's nice to be able to kind of relax this winter a little bit. We had a busy summer. My brother got married at the beginning of the summer. I had a lot of friends that also got married. So, it was a busy year for us. It was a fun year for us. We got a house and now we're kind of finally able to enjoy the house a little bit and relax a little bit.
That's awesome. So happy for you. So proud of you. Let's get into it. The boys on a three-game winning streak after all hell had broken loose there for a little while. They beat Seton Hall last night, 81 to 60, 83 to 61, sorry. Mac was able to clear the bench for about 6.5 minutes left in the second half, which is always a good sign to see, which means the boys handle business early and often. Lots of Blue Jays who really stood out. Just going to name a few performances out there. Ryan Nemhard, 14 and 5 assists. Trey Alexander, 15 and 6 assists. Ryan Kalkbrenner, 17, 8 and 6 blocks. And Arthur Kaluma, 14 points, 11 rebounds. Out of those four guys that I named, who most impressed you last night?
I mean, the story of the last three games has been Kalkbrenner. I mean, ever since he came back, you can kind of see that continuity being restored a little bit for the guys because, they were hitting a rough stretch, and it wasn't just the absence of Kalkbrenner. Everybody was kind of going cold at the same time. It seemed like prior to these three games, and just having him back, I think, has restored a lot of confidence in these guys. And so, just his ability to affect Seton Hall, you could see it last night on the defensive end. Just even where it seems like they may have an angle, he's somehow able to recover and block some shots, and you kind of flirt with a triple double there. It's his presence is huge, and then he's finishing shots at like a 75% right now or something ridiculous on the offensive end. So he's been great, and kind of you can just see it seems to have lifted everybody else's confidence as well, which is nice. It's been nice to see because you're starting to see some guys get more confidence in their shot. Trey the last couple of games especially, and so it's been fun. But I think the story is Kalkbrenner with just his ability to affect the game in a lot of ways.
I agree with you there for sure. We saw the Jays really struggle with his absence. And, last night, 5 blocks in the first half, that really deters the Seton Hall team, who really doesn't have a lot of shooting prowess to begin with to attack them as much as they usually do. Coach Mack has been known to say that, a lot of people around the team has panicked because of the 6-game losing streak. But yeah, the absence of Kalkbrenner during 3 of those games and then his recovery to get back into game shape and to see what he's doing now. Coach Mack has been known to say that he doesn't want to panic until he sees his team lose these types of games with being like fully healthy. Now that Kalkbrenner is back and it seems like their mojo is back on, uh, is this the team that we were anticipating going into the year? Like, is this the team that we all think could be a Elite Eight, Final Four type of team?
I mean, if they play like they did last night, that's certainly huge. I mean, making some threes goes a long way. I think we made 11 threes is what I saw on the box score, which, helps everybody get the confidence goes. Some couple of those games where we lost, the shots weren't going in, and sometimes that's the difference in those close losses. But, overall, that was one of the better games, I think, of the year. Seton Hall isn't a bad team. They're off to a rough start in Big East play, but they've lost close losses to Xavier and Providence. So it wasn't like they were the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, in the Big East. Now, who knows how it'll ultimately shake out, but they're a good team coming in, playing well. They just beat St. John's by a lot. So beating them by 22, which really we were up by 30 some in the second half. And like you said, he got to pull some of the starters. So it was a very dominated game, which was against a pretty solid team. So I think that's what the ceiling can be, and even then some. And we saw it a little bit in Maui as well, which is part of the reason why I think, I was still cautiously optimistic during our skid, because we saw what we're capable of. And we saw it again last night, and we've seen it the last couple of games as we started to kind of find our rhythm. And the next couple of games will be a huge stretch for us, which will really tell a lot, as we have a tough road stretch coming up, and then Providence at home after that. So 3 tough games, and that's why also the starters getting able to come out is pretty huge before that tough stretch.
You mentioned being cautiously optimistic. I think that's a pretty good way to frame it, but I want you to expand on that a little bit, because I know that around, Blue Jay Nation, it was like panic button, hit it, what's going on? How can we get back to who we are? So what about those games during that 6-game slide had you cautiously optimistic?
Well, and to me, it was kind of like what we saw at the beginning of the year, because we saw what we're capable of. I guess I would have been a little more concerned if we came into the year with these high expectations and then never showed that we could match that. And we saw that we could beat a top 10 team in Arkansas and beat a solid team in Texas Tech, and then go toe to toe with both Arizona and Texas, who are top 10 teams right now. So we saw what we're capable of, and really, to me, it was a matter of a couple different factors. Everybody seemed to go cold at the same time, which, again, shooting can be as simple as that. Sometimes if you just make a couple more threes here or there, that's the difference in those 2 or 3 point losses. And we weren't winning those close games this year like we did last year. And so sometimes that's the difference between a couple losses here or there. On top of that, you have 3 games without Kalkbrenner. Ryan was already sick before in that Nebraska game, as much as probably he wouldn't want to admit it. He was feeling it and kind of got dominated on the defensive end that game. And so that was the game where they decided to shut him down. So you have like 4 games essentially outside of the Texas and the Arizona losses, which, again, aren't bad losses, where you just miss that presence. And then, ultimately it was just a funk where we can get back to where we were at the beginning of the year was my feeling. Now, it can snowball and go the other way as well if you start to lose confidence, and as we've seen before. And a 6-game stretch was very rare, and it hadn't happened, frankly, since the year right after you left, where I think we lost 8 or 9 in a row, and they were all close losses, kind of like that for the most part, where it was just frustrating loss after loss. But this team has so much more talent than that team did, so it wasn't panic for me. It was more of, let's get healthy and let's kind of right the ship. Now it's not easy to say when you're going into Big East play, because you can't always find a couple easy wins here and there in the Big East. But this 3-game stretch is really huge, and ultimately, hopefully, we've got the right momentum going into these next couple games where it's really, really tough games.
I remember how painful that year was, because that was my first year out. I was in Romania for the first time. First time I had to stay up till like 4 a.m. to watch you guys play. Get off to a rocking start to start the year. And then like those close losses, like back to back to back 3-point, 2-point loss. I think at one point you guys had like a 6-game losing streak, but like the point differential was like 12 points or something like that. Like it was just so close every single time. So yeah, I do agree with you as far as like this particular set of Jays had more talent than the Jays back then, but still, like that was just so much. I don't know. I have to admit that I lost a little bit of optimism during that stretch, but I certainly have it back now that they're back on this 3-game winning streak, which is also how crazy this college basketball game is, right? Like there's so much parity around the nation. Like you lose a couple games, you're out of the conversation immediately. What has happened? What has gone wrong? You win 2 games, 3 games in a row, and all of a sudden you're right back in. I wouldn't be shocked if we beat one of these upcoming games on this road trip coming up here, that they're back in the top 25. Like how crazy is it, like the roller coaster of a season that the college basketball season has already been?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, last night K-State wins at Texas by they scored 116 points or something like that. And so you've got teams that already have been losing. Purdue lost 2 nights ago as the #1 team at home. So I mean, that's what's fun about college basketball. It's that close too, and that's where you lose a couple of these close games versus you pull out a couple of the close games. Makes a difference between being like a 4 seed and a 10 seed in the tournament come tournament time. So there's always that small margin of error, and Coach Mack talked about it a lot when we were there. It's like there's a couple plays here and there that can then determine a couple games. What you hear, it's very cliche, but it's very true in college basketball. And this year especially, there seems to be a lot of good teams and some really good teams, but nothing like I don't know. It's hard to peg who will be the if you had to pick a title favorite right now, because there seems to be like the top 5 is changing quite a bit. And I don't know. I don't know if we say that every year in terms of college basketball, but it does seem to be a little bit more parity this year. And to your point, if we're able to win one of these road games, we're right back in the conversation. Because I still think, we're not even receiving votes in the top 25. It's because it's kind of like you said, you lose a couple in a row and then you're forgotten about until you win a couple in a row and then you start getting
Yeah.
talked.
You mentioned the 3-point shooting a little bit earlier. I want to get back to that. The Jays made 11 of 27, shot 40%, I think was that final percentage. Going into the year, we knew that was going to be, something to look at, whether or not the Jays can make enough shots to open up the lane for a guy like Kalkbrenner to post up or dive to rim and get those, misdirection action that Coach Mack is so well known for. For the Jays to be successful moving on in the season, what is like a realistic expectation that fans should say, okay, if they shoot 35 to 40% ish a game, then we have a really good chance of winning all these games?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of a little bit north of 35, because I still don't think this is the greatest Creighton shooting team. In the last decade, we've had some teams that finished the season around 40%, which is and above. And so those are really good shooting teams, and I think we've got the shooting this year to have these type of games where we do make double-digit threes and can really just blow teams out like we did, but also games where we're not going to shoot as well. I think this team, though, also has the ability, especially with Kalkbrenner back, to be a defensive strong team. Last year they finished top 30 in KenPom defense. A lot of people like to quote that because that was very rare for a Creighton team. I mean, we never finished close to the top 30 ever in my time.
That is not in our DNA.
Exactly. And so last year we had a very, very below average shooting team for Creighton standards, yet we were able to overachieve because of the fact that they were able to dig in defensively, and they can do that again with a lot of the same defensive pieces back. So I think what to expect going forward is this is a better shooting team than last year, or you would hope for. I mean, we did lose some good shooters in Hawkins and O'Connell, but everybody's a year older and a little bit more confident. And then you add a guy like Baylor Shireman and Farabello who can really stroke at that. Ultimately, I think that 35 to 40 is a great range. And then those nights where you do shoot 30 to 35%, ideally now we're back to where we have the confidence defensively to dig in and then also can start driving the ball a little bit more as well. Because I think during that stretch when we were shooting poorly, it also got a little bit stagnant where we were just kind of relying on, okay, we're going to shoot our way out of it. And we didn't have Kalkbrenner. So, what else do we do in terms of getting to the bucket? And so to me, it was just that everybody kind of hit funk at the same time. And it's not a good recipe if you want to avoid a losing streak. But I think, the nice thing is this team is so balanced that if a couple of guys, one or two of them, have an off night shooting, then other guys can step up. I mean, last night, Baylor Shireman only had 6 points. He affects the game in other ways. But, he's been pretty consistently and pretty steady throughout the season. And the fact that he didn't have his best shooting night, but he didn't really have a bad shooting night. He just didn't need to score a whole lot last night. So it's just a nice balanced effort, I think, is what you can see and what people had hoped for coming into the year.
You mentioned Baylor, you mentioned Fabarello. A guy whose 3-point shooting has definitely improved is Trey Alexander. Like we've seen that these past couple of games, especially that 32-point game on Christmas night. He goes for 15 and 6 assists last night on 50% shooting. How important is it for the Jays for him to continue this consistent play? Like for him not to have such a big drop off like he had after, the Maui trip heading into basically this recent homestand?
Yeah, I think Trey's huge. I mean, outside of Kalkbrenner, you've got to me kind of him and Baylor are key players. I mean, the whole starting lineup is big because they're really balanced. But Trey's a guy that can go get his own shot, especially we saw it in the NCAA tournament last year, where if you are a late game and you want a guard to go get his bucket,
he was big time in the tournament last year.
Exactly. I mean, he stepped up huge, and that's because he's got the ability. Even though he's I think about 6'4", he's got long arms and he's got that fadeaway mid-range jumper that it's fadeaway, but it's kind of fading back to where he can get his shot up. And that mid-range game was so deadly last year, at the end of last year especially. He seemed to almost kind of just be a little bit off during that stretch post Maui, and I think the 3-point knocking that down as well as just getting his mid-range game back is huge because I think late in the year you're going to have some close games, or even in the next couple games where your late game you need a bucket and kind of give it to Trey and see if he can get a mid-range jumper. And it's not necessarily who people might think of first when they talk about Creighton, because I think he was the only one in the starting lineup who wasn't an all preseason Big East person. But he's huge from a defensive standpoint because he's guarding the best guard. That was a role that you really had when you were here at Creighton. And then sometimes that can take away from your offensive end. And last year he didn't have to do that as much because O'Connell did that a little bit more. But this year, I think maybe he's starting to find that rhythm of, okay, this is my role. And then also starting to just be more confident in his shot. And that'll be huge because, again, to me, when the play breaks down, he does have the ability to kind of find his shot, and his mid range seems to also be coming back with that three, which I think is a huge component because when the shots aren't falling or the offense isn't flowing quite as much, if a team is really kind of taking us out of our offense, which doesn't happen a lot, but they can, find ways to jam us up or get us stagnant. I think he's a guy that can kind of create for himself or others as well. Like you said, he had 5 or 6 assists last night.
That's one of those things that people don't understand. Like I'm so glad you mentioned that. When you are tasked to defend the best offensive player night in, night out, that takes a lot out of your legs. And offensively, like it's really tough to get that rhythm, especially like you said, like a play breaks down. Sometimes your first shot isn't a great shot, and it's kind of hard to get out of that funk because you know that you have to chase around the opponent's best player more often than not. So yeah, I applaud Trey for like taking that challenge. I'm sure Coach Mack talked to him before the season. It's like, hey, we feel like with your length, with your skill, you're the type of guy that could really shut down some of these guys. He's kind of proven it, to be honest. Like he's done a really good job to start the year. And I agree with you too. Like it's tough to find that right balance, and it's good to see him, kind of get back to that for sure. Another guy that we know is exceptional defensively, but just who hasn't had a lot of chance to get on the floor is Sharif Mitchell. He had a chance to really kind of stretch out last night a little bit. He had 7 points off the bench, led those guys off the bench. He's a guy that's been really intriguing for me for these past couple of seasons because, like, we know he had a lot of talent coming in, a lot of injuries, and he just hasn't been able to stay on the court as long as you might want him to have to be these past few seasons. And I feel like it's taking a lot of confidence away from him. And, when he steps on the court, he doesn't look like the guy that we knew as a freshman coming in. How important was it for him to just get a little bit of extended minutes, see the ball go in, do his thing defensively? And how important is someone like him going to be down the stretch for the Jays who, we always lament about the lack of bench scoring or the lack of bench production. It doesn't even have to be scoring necessarily. For a guy like him to get his confidence back up, how important is that for the Jays moving forward?
Yeah, that's huge, especially when you're in conference play. You don't have a lot of blowouts where you can have guys get, solid minutes off the bench if they're normally only playing, say, 5 minutes a game. If you get a game like last night where he can start getting a lot of run and still some meaningful minutes and try to kind of get his confidence back, because I think that's what it is. It's that rhythm he hasn't quite been able to find, and part of it's been injuries. He hasn't been able to stay fully healthy and really kind of find that rhythm. And we saw when Kalkbrenner got hurt and Fred King as a freshman was able to kind of get extended minutes, and that did a lot for his confidence and being able to get him into that kind of rhythm and really kind of start feeling his offensive and defensive impact on the game. So with Reef, it's tough because we've got really good guards in front of him. So to your point, he's not going to be able to play a lot, but there might be some games where we have foul trouble or somebody goes down with an injury for a game or two where we are going to need him perhaps in a tough stretch. And so anytime you can get those minutes, it's huge. And that's where we have seen Reef as one of the veterans on the team. When he was younger, he was able to impact the game defensively, and he just hasn't been able to kind of find his confidence in his shot quite yet. He had a deep three last night, but part of that's just kind of getting in the field. He may be a guy, and I haven't been at practice the last couple of years, but he may be a guy that's knocking him down in practice, and then until you kind of get those game rhythm minutes, you don't start to feel as confident, and that goes for every player, not just Reef. So I think anytime you can get guys minutes like that to really kind of bolster them for the stretch run and when they are going to be thrown in there potentially, it's huge.
Let's do a little bit of a preview for what the Jays have coming up. They got Saturday against UConn at UConn. One of the best matchups in the Big East, obviously, is the Sanogo-Kalki matchup. We had Kalkbrenner on the show earlier this year, and he didn't want to talk trash, even though I tried to egg him on. He didn't want to mention any names, even though I tried to egg him on. But I just know that this is a matchup that he's gonna really take personally. And same thing for Sanogo on the other end, because quiet as kept, UConn has not beat Creighton since moving back to the Big East. What is one of the things that you're going to be paying special attention to as the game develops on Saturday? What is a matchup? What is a key thing that you're going to be having your eye on?
Yeah, and the fact that they haven't beaten us, they've made it known. That I think one of their guys at Media Day kind of said it as well earlier this in the preseason that they had this game circled. So they've wanted to beat Creighton the last couple of years. They've been great games. I think we've beat them 5 straight times since they joined the Big East, and they've all seemed to be really solid games. And so they've had this one circled. It's going to be a hostile environment. I think they're They lost the other day. They have a tough game, I think, tonight against Providence. So they have a tough stretch of their own right now. So, frankly, what I'm looking for is kind of seeing the poise of our team going into a road environment like that. We played at Texas, so we've got a little bit of road experience, and we played tough games already in hostile environments and neutral court games. So the nice thing is this isn't our first road test. And, what I'm looking for is when UConn – when the game gets fast paced, because it very well could with both teams, are we playing fast but playing under control? And because I think that's going to be huge, because the emotions will be high in a game like that. They're going to, a couple of them might be talking as well. And so they're going to want to really badly send a message to Creighton because they haven't been able to. And, we were picked preseason favorite. They want to, establish that they're the favorite now. So, I'm just really looking for poise from the guys, which is a lot to ask for in a high intensity game, but also hopefully kind of continuing this confidence that we've got in the last couple of games and really, knocking down some shots and just start feeling into our own rhythm again, because I think that'll be huge and huge for our confidence going forward. If we can still play at this high level, win or lose on Saturday, if we play well, I think it goes a long way for the next couple of games and kind of going forward in the season, because it's going to be a tough game, a road opponent against a top 5 team. It'll be tough, but, matchup wise, yeah, I mean, Sanogo, I would imagine not only Sanogo, their backup big as well is really just solid that they can throw at Kalkbrenner. So it'll be really key to not really get him in foul trouble, which Kalkbrenner does a great job of not fouling. But, I think throwing Fred King against those two would be tough at this point in his career, which I think he could certainly do. But we'd like to, keep Kalkbrenner in there as much as we can.
The last time the Jays were in this kind of predicament was obviously against Texas. They did not shoot the ball well that night, and they still managed to, give Texas everything that it wanted. The ball drops a little bit more. I see the ball turning into the Jays' favor a little bit too. I mentioned the Kalki-Sanogo matchup. You did as well. I think he's going to have a huge game. Who's another Blue Jay that you think is just going to have kind of a breakout performance? We haven't seen Sharman go crazy just yet. I feel like he's kind of due. If that's your pick, I'm sorry for saying it before you did, but who's another Jay that you think is just going to have a pretty good performance here at UConn?
Well, when you asked the question, what first popped in my head was R2. So Ryan Nimhard, I think he's kind of due. He had a good game last night. He's been doing a lot better since we've won the last couple of games. He hasn't quite gotten to where he was in Maui in terms of some of those games where he kind of carried us, especially like an Arkansas game.
He was amazing in Maui, though. Like that was about as high of a level as I've seen him play.
And I think that's, I've gotten to meet him a couple times, so I don't know him like crazy well, but I think he's the kind of guy where in these big games, that's where he'll step up. And so I think, he's the guy that kind of lives for that big game atmosphere like we saw in Maui. And so, I guess for my prediction, I'd imagine if for the Jays to win, I think he'll have a really good game. And, if he does, then they have a great shot.
Last question I wanted to ask you before we get out of here. You talked about the Jays playing these tough environments. That Texas game obviously was super tough. All these neutral site games are really tough because it just kind of brings a different type of atmosphere. Like the crowd is 50-50. There's a lot of back and forth. The swing of the pendulum is like, you can really feel it in the air. What is the difference really, would you say, in like a neutral site game and like a true road game? And why are both difficult in their own right?
Yeah, they're both difficult because, I mean, no matter what, you feel the atmosphere. The neutral site game first, the nice thing is, when we played neutral games, Creighton fans traveled really well. So you would have a good group of Creighton fans that were cheering you on, and you kind of carry off that energy as well. But then, it's kind of, no matter what happens, there's a group of fans cheering. So it's kind of its own kind of high intense atmosphere. But when you're on the road, I mean, and it's a hostile environment, there is a couple of them in the Big East that were a lot of fun. Villanova, just number one because of how good they are, but they have good fans as well as Xavier. To me, are the kind of two that jump out. And then from Providence as well. That's that far East Coast fans there that aren't afraid to give it to you.
The hostility is real when you're at Providence. Like the one trip that I had there, I remember that vividly. Like you could just hear every single word that they're saying, and they're not nice words. Like they're not necessarily cheering their team; they're more or less cussing you out.
Yeah, and you're right. The bench is right by a lot of just the fans at Providence, especially. It's just the way it's, and same with Xavier for that matter, because you're right by the student section. But both of those, arenas are awesome atmospheres. And so what you're facing there, is when a team goes on that run, a home team goes on the run and the crowd's really in it, can you stay under control and not get off script too much? Or can you kind of have that poise and calm things down? And the nice thing is they did get that experience in Maui, as crazy of an atmosphere as that is in terms of a small gym. Everybody who was there talked about how just crazy the atmosphere was for those games, like high intensity. And so I think you saw some of that, in that game against Arkansas in particular. The team kind of punch after punch that Arkansas was throwing, they were able to answer the call. And I think that's huge for these games down the stretch, where when you're in a road environment, you're going to have a team like UConn, especially, that makes some runs, and the crowd's going to be going nuts. And can you stay under control and maintain the game plan? And so that's the difference there is kind of, clearly that the fact that you're just going, you guys are 12 guys versus the whole stadium of 20,000 or 15,000, however many they have, to where it makes it challenging. It's, sometimes it's just communication as well, if you're not able to communicate as much. But, ultimately, I think the nice thing is it's a fun game, a fun environment, and it makes it a lot more fun when you win on the road.
I definitely miss the times where we're in a timeout and you could see Mac screaming his ass off, and we still can't hear what he's saying because of how loud a crowd is. Like those are the moments for sure. They're super challenging, but I think if I were to compare neutral site versus a true road game, I would take a true road game in a heartbeat, just because, like you said, there's so much more camaraderie at stake there. It's the 12 guys in uniform versus the world, basically, is what it feels like in that hour and a half, 2 hours that you're in that environment. And there's really, truly nothing quite like going at Villanova, hanging a 40 piece on them like we were able to do my senior year, walking out of that arena at Wells Fargo, man, there's no better feeling than that. TC, I really appreciate you taking time out of your morning. I know you're a busy guy. I'm so happy to see you. But I'm sure we're gonna have a chance to catch up here soon. I'd love to have you back on the podcast so we could talk some more Jays basketball. Any last words for the fans, for the current players? Anything that you want to say as you're signing off?
The only thing to the fans is, just kind of trust that it's a long season. The good thing is we've seen us kind of get back on track a little bit here, and there is going to be a stretch where we maybe lose one or two more in a row at some point. That's just kind of the way it goes. Ideally not. Hopefully we can keep winning, but don't get too up and down on the one game at a time. And long term, I think we're going to be great. So I'm excited about this team, and it'll be a fun stretch coming up.
Let's get it. Come on, Jace. You hear a word from TC himself, the man, the legend, the Shawnee legend for sure. I appreciate you stepping into the J with me one more time. This has been another episode of the Welcome to the J podcast. I am your host, Jahenns Manigat. This has been my 10th guest this year, TC Tyler Clement. Appreciate you, brother. Take care. Stay safe. Happy New Year. How about that? 2023.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to all the Jays fans out there too. Yeah. We'll catch up soon. We appreciate you as always. Go Jays.
Yeah, thanks, Jay.